So then, we are back with more understandings on the time of the second tabernacle services, or refined in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find a layer of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, found in the Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. And then as we read the holy instructions for what they are, then the structurization of the instructions are easily derived, or then the ramifications from Leviticus the 23rd chapter becomes a whole lot simpler. Let's then evaluate as the nations then are trying once again of extending the 1,000 years of deceit, and then the lack of information and the ignorance of so many involved with some sort of a religion, customs, and then traditions, repetitious junk for so many centuries. Then as we read these instructions, we can observe then what it means salvation, what it means then tabernacling, and the byproduct of tabernacling. For instance, nations then are obviously trying once again, becoming more aware of their faults, so then they can execute plans more and then becoming prosperous. Some nations are plainly dumb. Let's try to evaluate then South America, for instance. Last year, the best economy of South America was Colombia. This year, for instance, what used to be the largest economy in South America, unfortunately, is mostly composed by a great portion of lazy and scoundrels politicians. Obviously, China wants more investments in many countries, but then the northeast of Brazil is simply a den of thieves. There is no other way of having these evaluated with B minus as a category type of a country. What truly makes a person nervous is the posing of this government as then trying many times, becoming more responsible, and the more they do, the more they show their own faults for being vagabonds, and then impeding other people of becoming prosperous. There used to be many years ago the project named then the Northeast Canal. In Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, Project Calha Norte. It is absolutely amazing how these liars, they make themselves such a chameleons. And not only they themselves are vagabonds and thieves, then they impede other people of becoming prosperous. Truly, we are in a point of the southern and central portion of this country of becoming then more active in imposing laws on the north side of Brazil, because they are simply out of their wits. They are type of people that they have themselves sold for a truckload of sand or rocks or bricks. Scoundrels, simply scoundrels. As the nations then are becoming more aware of the holy instructions, and then the BRICS system, as nations are trying to control, we find then the most important and distinct portion coming from the people. And the regular people, the regular worker, not only must do his or her own work, but then becoming the example of this scoundrel's government. Thinking of a system of helping the people is a situation. However, when people are then politicians and becoming licensed pirates, then truly changes the entire view of why people should put up with these trashy type of people. Daniel has stated many times, related with system and the time of the end, as he was experiencing himself what he received as far as system is concerned. We do not have every detail of the system of Daniel, but he had records of step-by-step formation of events as he was then acquainted with the ways of heaven, directly related with the first son of Ibrahim. He was related with those practices. However, the instructions over the years were then obviously changed for the benefit of Israel, because they did not want the continuation of tabernacling. Israel, unfortunately, as the Messiah said, they are a den of thieves. They themselves won't go to heaven, and they impede those who want. It is true that most of the time Israel tried its best, but then for the nation training for more than 1,000 years, and they are not being acquainted with tabernacling at this point. And as we read the fate of Israel as far as the misguiding and misleading representatives of the first covenant, it is truly unnerving. Daniel the prophet gave us a warning as far as the system, the powerful nations of the time of the Restoration period, Kingdom of the North, Soviet Union, Kingdom of the South, Africa, Kingdom of the East, China. And then the nations lining up themselves for the new system. The BRICS countries are coming and then visiting this country on July of this year. And then the BRICS Bank must be established. China has capital for investment, and Brazil, unfortunately, is standing in front of it simply because the government is lazy. They are thieves, liars, and lazy. At least they could be thieves and liars and let the people work. As then the BRICS set up their system, then China must move forward as far as lining up with Egypt and Syria and the countries of the East, so then harmony can be achieved. This truly brings a new understanding of the restoration period and bringing stability, so the banking of countries can be obviously monitored via transactions. What destroys a nation is obviously the impunitive and then the disastrous type of printing money festival. Comes a point where nations must admit the transition is then obviously in front of us as far as the new system is concerned. There is no way for nations of continuing with their own types of governments without acknowledging the new computerized system that China is then leading at the moment. The EU is in trouble. Most of the nations are in trouble. And they must acknowledge the new system given by China. It's not adopting their system, it's making them available. As we read Daniel, what can we gather as far as what's taking place amongst the nations? Simply is the simple fact of more debt and then the rising of the USD. This month, Dragon Mart in Cancun, Mexico is then obviously opening. Products found then in Mexico, in Cancun, is up to 5 times cheaper than buying in the United States. You can imagine what this is going then to do as far as the economy of the United States. So acknowledging the new system is already a forward motion. Only acknowledging it and obviously being aware of the third step. The first step is then selection of a product, the second is a form of payment, and the third is the investment on products done via computer. This, however, is direct link with the plan of salvation. When you include revelation, if you are a revealed person, you find then imperative placing aside religion and focusing on trade for some time. As we read Daniel, we observe that Daniel was not only talking and writing, but he was experiencing a very important system of his own time adopted by many nations of his own time. As Daniel then closed the 12th chapter, Daniel wanted himself becoming more aware of the dealings amongst the nations. He was asking more questions as far as, firstly then, it would be like the fourth kingdom. If you read the 11th chapter, what do you understand? There is a form of the fourth kingdom. The fourth kingdom, as you read, is then the system of Rome. If you watch then the structure and buildings around the world, you always find some sort of Roman building, as Daniel described. Then, what else do you find? You find then nations later globalizing themselves upon a system, as precisely was during the time of Daniel. Understandably, Daniel working for pagans makes the system pagan. During the time of Daniel and prior to his time, they should be concerned with tabernacling. Yet he was working for a pagan king, and the system of his time was pagan, because he was teaching the pagans how to do trade. Doesn't mean that Daniel was pagan, no. Daniel was not pagan. But he worked on behalf of a pagan system. Thus, when he asked then the angel regarding then as far as the system and the relationship of the nations at the time of the end, then the angel simply said, no more. Close the words and leave for the time of the end. Why the reaction of the angel was so stern? Because Daniel wanted a desire of his very own. Daniel was very prying during this time. He was so much involved with the system, and he didn't realize he was involved with pagans. Try to understand the distinction. We are not speaking of pagan tabernacling. We are speaking of a pagan system. Daniel was asking questions regarding a pagan situation, and the answers were not given. Sometimes when we do the work for God, we have a tendency at some point, as if we could reveal, based from our abilities, certain ways of doing things, as if we were important members in the plan of the Creator Himself. From topics that doesn't mean much as far as the tabernacle is concerned. But because of the influence of each of us in certain areas, we tend to place ourselves forward than we truly should have. It's amazing how scoundrel we are. We don't perceive. But the human ability when for a short moment is a side of tabernacling, it's always scoundrel, always scoundrelized. Yet if you are not murdering, you are not stealing, you are not speaking bad on anybody else, you have no desire of having someone else's wife or husband, then you are squeaky clean as far as the 10 laws, and then the other 600 plus. You can be clean in every one of them. Then for a short time you decided, as Daniel did, he was interested regarding the fourth kingdom and the beast, and that fearful and very fierce type of beast, and the angel said, close the understanding. So unfortunately, Israel has lost a track of time. And the Prime Minister of Israel, unfortunately, has the name of the Creator in his own name. We don't know why. Yet he searches for relationship with then the second beast of Revelation. And he is very far away from the Creator, you can be sure of it. As far as what Daniel has said, firstly then, he wanted the information in the 12th chapter. He was so involved with the situation, he forgot of tabernacling. He forgot he should have having plans regarding his people then returning to the Holy Land and then rebuilding the temple. This was truly important. And most importantly, shouldn't be a temple, but then the tabernacling of the desert during the time of Moses. This is what should he be thinking, and then at the same time promoting. No, but then you want to know the fourth beast and the relationship amongst those nations, and he was caught. And his desire was so much of it that the angel didn't give any kind of time to say, close the understanding. Does it mean Daniel was a scoundrel? No. But he wanted information that was not relevant. Daniel already had the understanding of the kingdom of the east. He had the understanding of the nation leading the time of the restoration period, trade level. He did understand the kingdom of the north and the south. He did understand tabernacling and the linking up with Yeshayahu the prophet, chapter 1:8. He knew the understanding of the second chapter of himself, Daniel, the second chapter, and the statue. He knew the relationship of the base of the statue. He knew then that the system of the end would have a liking similitude of the fourth kingdom, and it wasn't enough. And in this entire pagan situation, as far as the time of the end, he only mentioned briefly, and then because of Yirmiyahu's prophecy, he did understand that the 70 years then was ending. So if you write then a column of pagan versus tabernacling, the pagan is far above more important than tabernacling. What should Israel be concerned with? Tabernacling on the land of Cush. What US should be concerned with? The linker, the linking system. A computerized system uniting then China as the very center of this system, and then US making then the proper linkages so nations can do exchange via computer online while they are doing trade and then investing and then receiving and then purchasing and sending and taxes being gathered. But neither is doing what they should be doing. Then you find the scoundrel Israel wanting the third temple. The Messiah said no more temple. Then they are involved with desolation and an abomination that there is then the first tabernacle service. They don't acknowledge the completing section of the covenant. They are scoundrelously teaching then the Levitical priest mixed up with animals and sacrifices as junk. The Creator regards this kind of practice an abomination. But then you find US wanting extending its grip upon then the 1,000 years of deceit, do they not? So Gog and Magog, they visit and then they trying to scoundrelize even further. Should we make a retrospective? Absolutely. Should the US retrieve and rebuild? Absolutely. Should Israel refrain from its influence around the world? Should. As Daniel then recorded the relationship of the first tabernacle service and the second tabernacle services, and try to understand, he was prophesying 500 years prior of the birth of the Messiah. And understandably, he didn't make very many remarks as far as tabernacling, did he? No, he didn't. Because pagan influence, when trade is going nicely, is always strong. And though a person does not do any evil, the tendency of becoming far away of tabernacling is very grand. The core of human beings is a scoundrel by nature. A second aside of tabernacling always scoundrelizes. Tabernacling, gentlemen, as far as we can understand, there are a couple of understandings of covenant. You find the 11th chapter of Daniel speaking very precisely of tabernacling regarding the restoration period on the land of Cush. You find these explained in Yeshayahu. You find then the land of Congo, linked up with Yershiahu, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, related with trade, pure trade, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. What place of Africa, Central and South, is the most important other than Congo? Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia can't be Sudan, because it goes towards the south. If you don't know geographics, then you should take some time and study it. If you are a religious person with a tongue that can't be contained, so it truly is Congo, where China must make a deal with Congo, so then furthering then the BRICS Bank. Then you find the covenant then restored as far as restoration period. Covenant was never broken, because from the part of the Creator was never broken. The problem are the humans. They can't maintain their word. Then you find the covenant restored, second tabernacle services. First city on the land of Cush, what is today northern Sudan. Then you find prosperity afterwards is the byproduct of obedience from tabernacling standpoint. Then you find, because of this prosperity, then you find Israel's scoundrel trying to come up then with ideas of restoring the third temple. And the Messiah said, don't be concerned with the third temple, because he already said more than 2,000 years ago, not a stone is going to be left upon another. He was speaking of temple as a whole, not Herod's temple building at the time. As a global understanding of temple, he said, not a stone is going to be left upon another, no more of this temple. But he was establishing tabernacling as per the instructions of Moshe or Moses. And he instructed his people for a year, so then they could launch his 1,000 years of holy cities. Then the first holy city is re-established. And then you find prosperity afterwards. Then comes the scoundrelized Israel trying once again, screwing up the minds of the people, because they want the third temple and the Levitical sacrificial system, and Levitical priests being retrained with the dam of animals and so on and so forth, an abomination beyond measure. Then you find representatives of these scoundrels, these Levitical scoundrels, then twisting the minds of those who are from the second tabernacle services, then also the covenant. And then you find these scoundrels prevailing. Is the third temple will be rebuilt? No, it won't. I don't care if it is the Prime Minister of Israel, anybody else, Satan, or any other kind of spirit. The Messiah said, won't be, not a stone is going to be left upon another, desolate, gone. What will to have on Mount Moriah, when the time comes, is what the sons of Ishmael would let. A simple tent. And then the ships of Kittim then retrieving furiously. Israel and United States will be then separated. And the US will retrieve furiously. When you read Daniel the 11th chapter, you are reading of situations from our time already taking place with distinct names during the time when we then project those for the restoration period. Then the names they change. However, the events they remain exact. Prior of the ending of the 1,000 years of the Messiah, you found the kingdom of the north, east, and south during his time. Later was simply a reflection. That's why you find restoration. And the cities of the Messiah laid waste. You are speaking of a time where then is returning as it was. Obviously, you have other names involved, but the structure remains the same. So Israel as it is, wanting a third temple, and crazy Levitical priests mixing themselves up with animals and sanguinary practices, it is absolutely disgusting. Let's hope these priests then they become saved and away from any kind of rebuilding of temple. They are crazy. Yeshayahu the prophet explains, Yeshayahu chapter 1:8, the returning of the holy Shabbats, the returning of the sounding of the shofar, the returning of the sound of the shofar, then indicating the first lunar view of every month. You find then spring, you find autumn. Does that sound familiar from Leviticus? But surely it's not the rebuilding of the temple. It's reminding of ourselves of Moadim. The sanguinary practices are over. But because Israel at the moment is crazy, they're trying to line up with the West, crazier yet, in extending the 1,000 years where it's gone. Thus, when you read Daniel 11, then you understand. Even Daniel didn't escape of discipline. We understand why only a few are going to find the way. What is important are nations understanding tabernacling. First objective. Second objective is yielding of this new system on behalf of China, and then rescuing those practices of Daniel and the 1,000 years of the Messiah. So then Daniel practiced, there was then adopted by the Messiah during his 1,000 years, and then we are readopting as if it was a restoration. And imagine the thousands upon thousands of people benefiting from a system where they can, from their own homes, invest and then receiving from the same line. If people don't understand the hand of the Creator in this system, then so then, later we must speak more of tabernacling, then regarding Moshe and the receiving of the holy instructions, and then Moshe receiving the understandings of going to Egypt, and then the 40 years of experience of the nation then in the desert, and then going to the Holy Land and what they did, and the coming of the Messiah, the establishing of the 1,000 years of the Messiah. We're going to recapitulate this entire adventure. Because the more we speak of tabernacling, the more we understand the rest of it. If we do otherwise, then it's trouble. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.